Hey college football fans, it's a little wet outside here, but it's certainly not going to dampen the spirits of Chappy walking it off for episode 47. And staying within Pac-12 week, we're going to talk about a Pac-12 team that a lot of people are sleeping on, a lot of people are dismissing and just flat out dissing. So I ask you the question, if a tree only wins 3 games, does that mean it makes some noise in 2022? Well, of course, bad pun, bad joke, but we're talking about the Stanford Cardinal. And even though there's a lot of redwoods out there in Palo Alto, I'm not so sure that this team is necessarily one to sleep on in 2022. Now, I'll be upfront. I'm not going to call for a big winning season of 8 or more games, but I think that a bowl game is certainly within reach, and I think that possibly 7 or 8 is attainable. Granted, we're going to talk about some things that might seem like obstacles, but let's look at last year. So they finished 4-8 a season ago, but they played 8 teams that went to bowl games. They played 5 ranked teams during the regular season. The next highest team that played nearly that many in the Pac-12, there were a few of them that played 2. So Stanford faced off against more than double the amount of ranked teams that any other Pac-12 program played a season ago. And of their 8 losses, 2 of those losses were by 7 points or less. So that's what we like to call a close loss. And Stanford was very, very close in those games, even though the statistical output didn't necessarily show a lot of greatness. So what else good do they have coming into 2022? Well, they returned 62 lettermen, pretty even on both sides of the ball, as well as the special teams units. They were very disciplined last year. They were ranked 22nd in penalty yards committed a season ago, so that always bodes well. They also are they're returning 10 starters on offense, and I believe 8 starters on defense. So back in 2020, the COVID year, when they went 4-2, which would translate into roughly an 8-4 record during a regular schedule, they did much better. So my point here is, when they have to rebuild and they lose a lot of their starters on offense especially, things have not gone that well. However, this is year 4 of Tavita Pritchard, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback who, by the way, beat top-ranked USC when Stanford was 35-point underdogs back in the Jim Harbaugh era. But their offense averaged over 30 points a game back in 2020 when they had 8 starters returning. So with 10 starters returning this year, including Tanner McKee, who some are projecting to be a quarterback taken in the NFL draft in the first few rounds, they also bring back what I'm calling the second best group of receivers in the Pac-12 behind mighty USC. And that includes also all Pac-12 tight end Benjamin Jurasik, who had 46 catches a year ago to lead the team in receptions, but also nearly 16 yards per catch. So big numbers there. They were banged up at the wide receiver position, but Michael Wilson is back, Bryson Tremaine is back, and these are big physical receivers. You add that in with Elijah Higgins, John Humphreys, so they've got guys that they can sling the rock to, as long as McKee can do that efficiently. All 5 offensive line starters come back, and this is a group that's pretty deep of highly touted high school players. So Stanford has been one of the better offensive line recruiting schools over the last few years. In the last 4 seasons, they have had national recruiting rankings of 19th in 2019, 21st in 2020. They dipped in 2021, 2021, yeah. They dropped down to 50, but I think a big part of that was COVID related. And then this past cycle, they ranked 17th nationally, which is the best they've had in the last 6 years. So the talent is on that roster. Big question mark on offense is going to be, are they going to get a run game to complement that passing game? E.J. Smith Head coach David Shaw says that he's due for a breakout season. Of course, yes, he's the son of Emmitt Smith of NFL fame. Not too deep in the backfield, but if E.J. Smith can pull off 850, 900 yards or more, I think that's going to complement that Tanner McKee passing offense quite well. You look over, McKee himself, Stanford was ranked 36th nationally in completion percentage. He completed 65% of his passes, 15 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, so you want to clean that up a little bit. And that's another thing, too, to promote Stanford, is they were not very good in the turnover margin last year, not because they were turning the ball over a lot, but because they were not getting takeaways a lot. So you have to figure that they might progress to the mean, and that usually translates into added victories. Now getting to the defensive side. Finally, they're going to move to a 4-2-5 style of defense. They've been running a 3-4 in the past few years. Now they're very thin at the defensive line and edge positions, so what they've done is taken some of their traditional outside linebackers and moving them more up on the line, widening them out. The 4-2-5 has typically done well for a lot of programs and a lot of defensive coordinators, and they're going to be young, but they've recruited a couple good edge guys. David Bailey is their top recruit in this year's class, expected to get some early playing time. Aaron Armitage was the top guy last year, and those two look to be, if they live up to their billing, pretty good machines this year on that front. They're just going to need experience, and they're going to need help behind them. But they've got that three pretty good linebackers, or at least serviceable. Levani Damani, Jacob Mangum-Farrar, and Ricky Mizon will kind of platoon between those two linebacking spots. The secondary is where Stanford should improve and should get better. Caillou Blue Kelly is an All-American type corner. He had 11 pass breakups a year ago to go along with 2 interceptions, not to mention 58 tackles. Kendall Williamson and Jimmy Wyrick added 7 and 6 pass breakups respectively at nickel/safety positions. So they're kind of the jacks, or the trump cards back there. They can line up and go man-to-man and corner, but they can also play in the intermediate valleys and alleys of that secondary and also help keep the top on it. And speaking of the top safeties, Jonathan McGill and Oklahoma transfer Pat Fields, those two I think could make a pretty good safety tandem back there. Fields was the only guy that Stanford got in the transfer portal, but again, they're kind of limited by the master's program there, so it's hard for them to get grad transfers. It's hard for them to get transfers anyway because of the admissions policies at Stanford. But nonetheless, the defense should be improved relative to where they were last year. Special teams, Casey Filkins averaged about 15 yards per punt return a season ago. Joshua Carty was 9 of 10 on field goals inside 49 yards. He was also 1 of 5 from 50 plus range, but he did hit a 51-yarder. So 90% inside 50, not too shabby. Ryan Sanborn, their punter, averaged 43 yards a kick on 60 punts. He had 16 of them fair caught, and 19 were dropped inside the 20. So, and throw on top of that, they had top 25 coverage units on both the kick and punt coverage teams. So Stanford usually puts out a top 30 special teams ranking every year. They did last year, and reason to believe that they'll do it again this year. Now you look at the schedule. This is where a lot of people get hung up on Stanford this season. So they start off with Colgate at home. Then they have USC at home, but that could be a help getting the Trojans that early. They might still be trying to figure out their chemistry, still trying to get used to the new air raid system that Lincoln Riley brings in. I know that Graham Harrell ran an air raid system, but anytime you've got new staff and you've got new teammates, because they have a lot of transfer portal guys coming in, especially at the skill positions, it could be a good spot for Stanford to catch USC completing that transition. I'm calling for a USC win, but keep in mind the home team in that series between Stanford and USC, for the last 5 games, the home team has won, and that game is being played on the farm this year. Then they have a bye, which really hurts Stanford playing 2 games, then you've got your rest week, and then you go 10 consecutive weeks that you've got to play. So it'll be interesting to see how well they handle attrition. Week 3, they go to Washington where they're 3-2, but those 2 losses were both by 7 points or less. So they've played Washington close in the times that they haven't beat them in the last 5 years. Then they go to Autzen to play Oregon where they're 3-2. I think they beat Washington, by the way. I'm going to call that. Then game 5, they come back home to take on Oregon State, where a team that they've beaten 5 straight times and 11 of the last 12. So Oregon State, a lot of people are picking them to continue to rise, but playing at Stanford and in a series that David Shaw has kind of controlled quite considerably, I think that's going to be in the favor of the Cardinal. Then they have to travel to Notre Dame, where they've lost 3 straight in that series, and they've lost big, so we'll move on past that. Then the back end of the schedule, homecoming against Arizona State, a team that they've beaten 2 out of the last 3 times, and the home team in that series is 13-4 in the last 17 games. And a shout out to Phil Steele. A lot of information comes from his magazine, as many of you probably already know. After Arizona State, they travel to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA, where they've lost 2 of the last 3, but prior to those 3 games, Stanford won 11 straight. So the Cardinal have pretty much dominated this series, although they've tripped up the last 2 of the last 3 years. Then they have Wazoo at home, and Wazoo, I think, will be coming off an upset of Utah, so that might be a hangover game that the Cougars put all their chips in the basket against Utah, and then they come out to the farm to take on Stanford. Even though Wazoo has beaten Stanford 5 straight times, 3 of the last 4 losses were only by 3 points. So again, even in losing efforts, Stanford has played close. So I think Stanford gets the win there. Then they travel to Utah, Stanford does, a team that they've lost to 4 straight times, but the visitor has won more often than not in the last few years. Then they're at Cal for the game for the Axe, and Stanford is 3-2 in that matchup, but they've won 6 straight in Berkeley, and the game is in Berkeley this year. So if recent history holds true, that favors the Cardinal. Plus, I think Cal is just down. I think that they're going to be doing even more reloading than Stanford is this year. And then the last game at home against BYU, a BYU team that I think is going to be really good, but at that point, I'm projecting BYU to be 9-2 coming into that game. So at 9-2, BYU is not necessarily playing for a New Year's Six spot. They're not playing for any major bowl game, whereas Stanford at that point, I think, will be coming in at 6-5, and they're playing for a better bowl berth. I mean, with 6 wins at that point, they'll have already clinched it. But I think that's going to be, I think Stanford's going to be more up for that game, especially their home finale, senior day. So very easily could see a Stanford win over the Cougars there, a maybe less than motivated BYU Cougar team at that point. So again, I'm calling for 6-6 for Stanford, which is over the 4.5 that many numbers from Vegas are suggesting. So what do you think about the Stanford Cardinal? Do you see as optimistic an outlook as I do, or do you think I'm just flat out nuts? So hit me your thoughts on Twitter. Thanks for following. Follow my YouTube channel as well, and check out the website cfpcollegefootball.com. I'm Chappy, and this is what I know.